The rise of Adolf Hitler was far more than a mere story of political power. It was the opening chapter of an indictment of the most horrific crimes humanity has ever witnessed, a dark journey leading directly into the abyss of a brutal genocide. The story begins in a quiet border town in 1889, in a home where the air was thick with tension and the shadow of a stern father. Adolf's childhood was a battlefield of wills. His father, a rigid customs official, ruled the household with an iron fist and a leather belt. He demanded absolute obedience and envisioned a stable, bureaucratic future for his son. But the boy was a dreamer, stubborn to the core. Every time he picked up a paintbrush instead of a textbook, he faced the wrath of his father's temper. This constant friction did not break his spirit. Instead, it forged a deep-seated resentment toward authority and a cold, internal resilience. In stark contrast was his mother, the only person he truly loved. Her devotion was his sanctuary, but her indulgence also nurtured a dangerous sense of self-importance. When his father passed away, the boy felt a sense of liberation rather than grief. He was finally free to pursue his artistic ambitions, fueled by his mother's belief that he was destined for greatness. At 18, with a heart full of grand ambitions and his mother's meager inheritance in his pocket, he moved to Vienna. He saw himself as a future master of the canvas. However, the city of music and art had no place for him. Twice, the Academy of Fine Arts rejected him, labeling his work uninspired. This rejection was the first major fracture in his psyche. Then came the ultimate blow: his mother died of a terminal illness. Left alone in a vast, indifferent city, his money quickly vanished. The aspiring artist was forced into the shadows of society. For 5 years, he lived the life of a drifter, sleeping in homeless shelters and selling hand-painted postcards for pennies. It was in these dark corners of Vienna, amid hunger and humiliation, that his soul began to curdle. He spent his days in libraries and cafes, consuming radical pamphlets and newspapers. He looked for a scapegoat for his own failures and found it in the diverse, multicultural fabric of the city. He began to believe that his struggle was not his own fault, but the result of a grand conspiracy. The failed artist was slowly being replaced by a radical ideologue. In 1913, seeking to escape the obligations of his homeland and wanting to live among those he considered his own people, he fled to Munich. His life there remained solitary and gray. He had no friends, no lovers, and no professional success. He was a ghost in the city, an observer of political rallies who practiced his own speeches in front of cracked mirrors. By the summer of 1914, he was a man with no future and a past he wanted to burn. When the First World War broke out, he did not see it as a tragedy, but as a divine rescue. In a famous photograph of a cheering crowd in Munich Central Square, his face is visible, radiant with a terrifying joy. To him, the war was a chance to belong, to wear a uniform, and to find a purpose that the civilian world had denied him. He knelt and thanked destiny for the opportunity to serve. As he enlisted in the army, the homeless drifter vanished. In his place stood a soldier who finally had a family in the regiment and a mission in the trenches. The stage was set, and the world was about to learn the cost of one man's bitterness. When the Great War began in 1914, the man who had been a ghost on the streets of Munich finally found a home in the Bavarian army. He was not a frontline rifleman but a regimental message runner, one of the most perilous jobs in the war. While others cowered under the relentless shelling, he seemed to possess an eerie, almost fanatical bravery. He ran through no man's land, under curtains of fire to deliver orders, earning the Iron Cross First Class, a rare honor for a common corporal. To his fellow soldiers, he was an oddity. He didn't complain about the mud, he didn't care for women or drink, he lived only for the regiment. But in October 1918, his luck ran out. Near Ypres, a British gas attack left him temporarily blinded, his eyes seared by mustard gas. It was while he lay in a hospital bed, shrouded in darkness, that the news of the German surrender reached him. He wept in bitter humiliation. To him, the German army hadn't been defeated on the field, it had been stabbed in the back by politicians at home. In that hospital ward, the soldier made a vow, he would enter politics and right this perceived wrong. Returning to a Munich shattered by hyperinflation and political chaos, he was hired by the army as a political instructor, essentially a spy to monitor small political extremist groups. One evening, he was sent to observe a tiny, disorganized group called the German Workers' Party, DAP. During the meeting, something clicked. He stood up to speak, and for the first time, he realized he possessed a terrifying gift. He could take the hunger, the shame, and the collective anger of a broken people and weave it into a spell of words. He quickly seized control of the party, renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, and designed the striking red banner with the swastika. He was no longer a nameless messenger, he was becoming the Führer of the desperate. In 1923, fueled by overconfidence, he led a disorganized attempt to seize the government in Munich, the infamous beer hall putsch. The coup ended in a hail of bullets, and he was sent to Landsberg prison. Many thought his career was over, but the cell became his study. There, he wrote Mein Kampf, My Struggle, a dark blueprint for a future Germany purged of those he deemed enemies and expanded through living space in the East. He learned a vital lesson in prison: power could not be seized by bullets alone, he had to use the tools of democracy to destroy democracy from within. The world remained stable for a few years, and his party languished on the fringes. But in 1929, the global economy collapsed. Germany was plunged into a nightmare of unemployment and starvation. This was his moment. Promising work and bread, he used modern propaganda, flying across Germany in private planes and appearing as a savior. By 1932, his party was the largest in the parliament. The old political elite, arrogant and desperate to stop the communists, thought they could tame him. They believed that if they gave him the chancellorship, they could pull his strings from behind the scenes. On January 30, 1933, they made the most fateful mistake in history: he was appointed Chancellor of Germany. He moved with lightning speed. Using the Reichstag fire as a pretext, he suspended civil liberties and pushed through the Enabling Act, which gave him the power to bypass Parliament entirely. When the elderly President Hindenburg died in 1934, he merged the offices of President and Chancellor. The trap was shut. The failed artist and the blinded messenger had become the absolute dictator of a world-class military power. As the torches lit up the night in Berlin, the world stood on the precipice of its darkest hour.